Welcome back to Yerushalmi Chala. We're paying Rishon Alef above, which is Daf Tezayin Amud Aleph. Okay, Hachala v'Hatruma. Chayovin alei Misa b'Chomesh. If a Yisrael eats them, it's Chaim Misa b'Shamayim. Eats it b'Shogeg. He has to pay the principal an additional fifth. Basura l'Zorim. So Yisrael's not allowed to eat it, but Cohen, once they're given to the Cohen from the Yisrael, they're his money. He can use it to buy whatever he wants, as we make a woman. If they get mixed up in chulin, they're not batel unless you have 101. So if a sa of chala or truma falls into 100 of chulin, then that sa is nullified from the mixture. You give the whole mixture to Kohenim. And the remainder is Mutzit Yisraelim. You give that, well, you give one to the Kohenim, the remainder is Mutzit Yisraelim. If it was less than 100 against it, the whole mixture is Asat Yisraelim. Yeah, you have to wash your hands. Some Yadayim are Posim Rabbanan with Truma and Chala. So you want to touch these things, you have to wash your hands. The Harav Shemesh. The Kohen is Tameh. He's gone in the mikveh. He cannot eat Truma till nightfall. Even though he's already tahor as far as chulin is concerned, he passes truma by chala not touching it. You cannot take truma or separate chala from tahor stuff for tameh stuff, or a tameh dough for a tahor dough. And you have to take from that which is near you. At the time of Rafash, you should separate for truma and chala close to where you're being mafresh from. Now some say this is of being tom shalom min amukav, not near you. Some say it's learned from Mimenu, which it says in the Torah a few times. The Sifri brings that. Some say they quote the Yerushalmi. We don't have this Josh in our Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi in Trumas learns it from a pasuk with Trumas Maseh. Some say it's the din of the Torah, and some say it's only an Asmachta, and yes, it's only with Rabbanon. Okay. Umin. Hadava Hagomo, you can't separate Truma except something from which has been had a Gemar Malacha, it's complete. And Chala as well, when the dough is complete, when it's been kneaded together. Someone who says, Kalgar need Truma, I want to give everything Truma. Chala says the whole thing should be Chala. Lo maklum, worthless. Actually, Yishai makes us, you have to leave a bit left behind. Yeah, you have to be a chulin left behind. Rabbi Yehuda bar Pasir v'chonim v'shem v'shmuel bar Rav Yitzchok. Chala is lashon chulini. I might have thought chala means chulin. I might think mutzah legalgaba. But there's no kedusha. Anyone has it. From Cain Tzachim, that's why I have to say chala about truma. Chayamin ala misa b'chomesh. Chala has got the same din as truma in this respect. Yeah. The main chiddush is as far as chala is concerned. The 10 mitzvahs you do till you eat a loaf of bread. And what are they? Like tacharosh. Don't plough your ox and your donkey together. Baal tizra. Don't sow mixed kilayim in your field. Baal tachsam. Don't muzzle your ox while it's threshing. Leket, shikha, peah. For the poor. Truma and Maser Rishon and Maser Sheni and Chala. So you have 10 mitzvahs you do before you have your bread. Rabbi Yitzchok Kadyasi Masi Pizza Lubiyodai, when he was taking the bread in his hand to eat it, he stretched out his 10 fingers. And he said, Hari Kiyamti Asa mitzvahs, I've kept 10 mitzvahs. Some say you put your fingers out when you wash your hands before eating bread. You lift up your 10 fingers after washing, before you do the mitzvah bread. Shulchan Aruch says, time of Hamoitzi, you should put your 10 fingers on the bread. It's a hint to the 10 mitzvahs that you fulfill with the bread. And that's also why there's 10 words in the bracha of Hamoitzi corresponding to these 10 mitzvahs. There's 10 verses, 10 words in various psukim which talk about the chesed of Hashem with providing food. Chaim brings that in 167:34. Okay. Now we come to the last part of the Mishnah. Somebody wants to give everything for Truma. Doesn't work. You have to leave a bit. If you separate Chala, you have to say Chala ala kol. This should be Chala for la. You're separating Truma ala kol. Truma l'Hashem. Zeh Shema Miyuchad, you have to do your hafrasha for the sake of Hashem. Menan Shlach Sekloma Trishayim, because how did you have to leave something? So Amaloma Mereishis, Veloi Kol Reishis. Right? Mereishis is a meal. Part of the Reishis you must give Truma, not all of it. So if you said the whole dough is challah, doesn't work. Alright? I mean, what's the chiddush here? Every mitzvah you have to do the Shem Shemaim. We said, you do it the Shem Hashem. Every mitzvah you do the Shem Shemaim. Some say here we learn the chiyuv to make a bracha on the hafrasha of challah and mention Shem Shemaim. Now usually brachas are Rabbanon, but maybe this drush is telling you, you have to mention Shem Shemaim when you separate challah. And now we have a bracha and we'll fulfill our duty with that. But it could be the chiyuv is in Rabbanon and it's just a smachta. Okay. Perek Sheni. Yeah? Okay. We're talking about produce that grew in Chutz La'aretz and was brought into the land. Peiros. Produce from the 5 species of grain. Chutz La'aretz. She'nechnasu la'aretz. It was brought into the land. It was kneaded in the land. And it was baked as bread. Chayav and b'chala. You have to separate challah. The chiyuv tavua is challah was in the land. Now, what about if it grew in Israel and got taken out? Yotzu mikan, produce that went out of Israel, l'shamtu abroad and made into bread. Rabbi Lezer mechayev, Rabbi Lezer obligates challah. Rabbi Kiva poiter, Rabbi Kiva exempts. After chutz la'aretz sheba b'sfina la'aretz, when you have earth of chutz la'aretz which has been brought in a boat into the land, chayev, whatever grows in it is obligated by Ma'asus b'shvius. So when is that? That's if the boat is sort of touching the ground of Eretz Yisrael. But if it's not touching the ground and it's sort of floating above, then the grain is potter, whatever grows in it from Ma'asus and Shvius. Okay? So he says if the boat is not touching the ground, then it's not really connected to the ground. You make a dough with fruit juice but not water. It can be eaten with tamei hands, because this challah doesn't receive tumah. A woman can sit on the ground, and she can separate her challah, even aruma, when she is not clothed, because she can cover her nakedness when she's sitting down, as opposed to a man who is unable to do so. So since she can cover over her nakedness when she's sitting down, she can, therefore, the time of the bracha, but a man is not able to do so. And the man can't make the bracha, he shouldn't separate challah in that state. Okay? So here, to make a bracha, one should really be covered over in garments, right? You shouldn't be using your own body to cover yourself. What sort of covering of the erva through her legs, the way she's sitting down? It could be here, basically there's no choice, you've got no choice really. The whole kissah through her body is not a kissah. Here, the main kissah is by her sitting down on the ground. The main covering is by her sitting on the ground. And this is the issue of mentioning Hashem Shemaim when the person is unclothed. But always you have to be careful, shouldn't uncover areas that are usually covered. Some say, how is this woman allowed to make a bracha? Some say, mitzvah chiyuvis, that which you have to do, then you have to stand up when you make these brachas. But mitzvah hafrashas challah is not chiyuvis. It's being mesaken, so if you don't want to eat the dough, you don't have to separate challah. So maybe that's the question why you don't have to stand. It seems it's not a chiyuv to make this bracha. You don't have to separate challah, therefore you don't have to stand. Some say really you should stand, but here they were lenient to the woman to make the bracha sitting down because there's a need for her to sit down to cover herself. Peiros chutz la'aretz, which go into the land, are chayav challah. It says, you'll come, maybe as chum to the land, and I bring you shama atem chayav. In there you have to separate challah, what grows even in chutz la'aretz, because it's brought into the land. But ein atem chayavin, you are not obligated to separate challah from that which grows abroad when it is chutz la'aretz, when it's found abroad. Some Mefarshim learn, it's talking about Eretz Yisrael stuff that went abroad. It's Rabbi Kiva's shitta. Okay. Now, this pair is brought into the land is Chayav Challah. Tani, we learned to advise, Zu Divrei Reb Meir. This is the view of Reb Meir. Avol Divrei Reb Yehuda. According to Yehuda, Peiros chutz la'aretz shenechnasu la'aretz, from abroad that go into the land, is an argument. Rabbi Lezer Paiter and Rabbi Kiva Mechayev. Rabbi Kiva obligates. What's their rationale? Matam Rabbi Eliezer, who exempts produce of abroad brought into the land. You'll eat lechem haaretz, you'll separate truma. The chi of chala is from the lechem that grows from the produce growing in the land, but loy lechem b'chuz lo, it's not that which grew abroad, even though the kneading and the baking is in the land. Matam Rabbi Akiva, what's Rabbi Akiva's reason? You'll come to the land and Shani maybe it's from Shama. Shama, what's the word Shama telling us? There in Israel you have all fruit, whether it's fruit from Israel or fruit from abroad. What's Rabbi Eliezer do with this? What does he do? Yeah, this pasuk where Rabbi Akiva learned his shit. So what does he learn from this pasuk? So there was a discussion. Harav Shem Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Bar, Shem Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Hillel, Shem Ben Lakish. Kach Meshem Rabbi Akiva's Rabbi Eliezer. This Rabbi Akiva will answer back. Einat Moida Lid, you know, agreed to me, when the Jewish people came to the land, they find dough of the Canaani, you have to agree that Chayav Chala. Now they grew in the land before the Jewish people went in. There was no Chayav Chala yet. Nevertheless, the dough that they find is Chayav Chala, because now it becomes bread after the Jewish people have come in. So for the same reason, that which grows abroad and then comes into the land should be Chayav Chala, even though it grew in an exempt area, but now it's lechem in the land. Rabbi Eliezer accepted these reasons. And the fact that he accepted the question, he agrees that the dough that they find when they come into the land is Chayav Chala. But how does he know it? He must have learnt it from the word Shama. That's the answer to the question what Rabbi Eliezer does with this word. Rabbi Yossi, huh? No, nowadays, Chalas Eretz Yisrael. You got me now. Definitely, I think it's Drabonon. Chalas Eretz Yisrael Drabonon, and here is like more minig really. Or here, they still make a bracha here. There's also Drabonon here. Chalas Eretz Yisrael nowadays. No, I think Chalas Eretz Yisrael is Draisa nowadays. So what do we say in the notes here? There's funny machlokes about it. Let's see. Chalas Eretz Yisrael. Sheres Achiyov. Yeah, I think it's Doraisa in Eretz Yisrael. Yeah. That's right. Reishis Ari Seichem. Yeah, that's right. If, however, Chalas Chuz La'aretz Min HaTorah Chiv Chalas Eretz Yisrael. That's right. And where all the grain came from Eretz Yisrael. If it came from abroad, it's still Chayav Chala. Midrabanan, you have to separate Chala and Chuz La'aretz. So the Torah's Chala shouldn't be forgotten. And that's why it's Tameh, because the guys are Tumah and Eretz Ha'amim. Yeah? And they've got some colours with Chala and Chuz La'aretz. It's a Machlekes Tanoim, Chalas Eretz Yisrael nowadays, is it Doraisa or not? Most poskim hold it's Drabanan. Because Badla Kodesh is Eretz Yisrael. But it seems most poskim hold even Eretz Yisrael might be Drabanan. Okay. So what we got now? Tani. Where are we? Yeah. Rabbi Yossi. So now, what about the question that Rabbi Akiva asked Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Yossi. Mainly, Rabbi Akiva Moisiv is Rabbi Eliezer. How's he asking him this question? And whom Mekabim and Rabbi Eliezer accepts his question? Tamam. Now, with the dough that they find when they come in the land, until they come in, lemafreya, beforehand, Yasha, they already inherited it from Avraham Avinu's time. And therefore, wherever the dough grew, bechiyuv, it's not gedulei petur, and that's why they come in as chayav chala, because it's been chayav. Now, it could be some say lemafreya means now it turns out it was chayav all along, or it was chayav all along. But there's no raya for the situation of produce that grew b'ftur in Chuz La'aretz and brought into the land. And he brings a raya that the Bnei Yisrael inherited the land from the time of Avraham Avinu. Lezarcha ete, doesn't say I will give. Zarcha nasati, I already gave. Hashem told Avraham, Kvar nasati, I already gave him the land. Ma'amakayim, Rabbi Akiva, Talmud Rabbi Eliezer. What does Rabbi Akiva do with the pasuk, which is the source of Rabbi Eliezer? What does he do? He says, you'll eat melechem haaretz, you'll separate truma. He learns, bisfina, a boat in the Mediterranean, shenechus haaretz, and it comes into the land, and at that time the dough was baked. Here, in Kirbu Panau, so if the outer crust of the dough has baked after the boat comes into the area of the sea, now this is the area of the Mediterranean, min achutz v'lifnim. Now if you imagine, you take the most northern part of Eretz Yisrael, and you draw a line straight down to the bottom part where it's on the sea, right? The northern part on the Mediterranean side, and all the way down to Mitzrayim, the area of Nahar, Mitzrayim, wherever it is. Draw a line down. So if a boat comes into that area, and then the bread gets baked, so we're saying that will be Chayav Chala. It's considered Lechem Haaretz. V'chayeves, you have separate Chala. Menachut, Belachut, anything beyond that line, Petura is Potter. Al-Da'atin Rekiva, he's finta, he is the Sagayach Nosasan. The same din about a dough baked in a ship coming from abroad into the land is the same with the dough of a Nachri given to a Jew as a gift, and also dough that the Bnei Yisrael find when they come into the land. Here, Rabbi Kiva holds a kol halech hachakuma batana. At what point did it bake in the oven? If it's sort of crusted after the boats come into this tchum, or after the guy gave it to the Jew, or after the Jewish people come into the land, it's chayav chala. Okay. Now, Rabbi Kiva learns it from Lechem Haaretz. Rabbi Lezer has got another drasha for this. So according to him, chayav chala doesn't depend on the baking or the crust. He holds it's the end of the kneading process, right? And that's the view of the Chachamim who argue Rabbi Kiva's later on. There's another case where Rabbi Lezer holds like the Chachamim agrees to Rabbi Kiva. Moedim Chachamim. Now, Rabbi Lezer agrees like the Chachamim and Rabbi Kiva that a dough that they find a dough coming into the land. That if it crusted after they come in the land is Chayav Chala. And Mimad Rabbi Kiva Masechet Rabbi Lezer, the fact that Rabbi Kiva asked on Rabbi Lezer who puzzle stuff coming in from the din of the dough, and when they come in and they find his Chayav Chala, and he accepted this quietly. The fact that he was quiet, he accepted it, he agrees Rabbi Kiva with what he said. So not only the dough that wasn't needed that they find they come into the land, but also any other dough which has been kneaded and is not baked yet, is Chayav Chala because it was baked after the Jewish people come into the land. Now once we're talking about the dough, when they come into the land, as far as Chala is concerned, now we're talking about Chodosh. The Torah says you can't eat from the new grain until the 16th of Nisan, right? According to Rabbi Lezer, this as soon as the Jewish people come into the land. Rabbi Yoina, Rabbi Yirmiyah, they come into the land on the 10th. And they find produce which is growing in the winter of that year. Is it forbidden for being the new grain? He says, of course it should be also. Right? The Yisro Chodosh is chal on any stuff that was growing beforehand. That's all very well. Maybe a sack which is grown in the winter of that year and is forbidden, it's still moist. But afilu yevesha, well, even if it's dried out, it's from the previous year and it's still connected to the ground the whole summer till they come into the land. But we say, look, it already reached its completion, nigma gidulai. Right? Maybe it's as if it's been cut already, and therefore the Yisro Chodosh doesn't apply. It says afilu yevesha, yes, even if it's dry, it's forbidden. Afilu kutsura, even if it's cut when they come into the land, it's also because of Yisro Chodosh. Me'az, if that's the case, afilu chitin baliyah. If that's the case, you find wheat in the attic when they come into the land, should be forbidden. Are you going to tell me? Do you think they didn't eat matzah on the first night of Pesach when they come in the land? They came into the land on the 10th of Nisan. The Omer was only brought on the 16th. Are you telling me everything was asa until they brought the Omer, then they didn't eat matzah on the night of Pesach? Rabbi Yonim in Denavkis, after I left Rabbi Yirmiyah, I was sad. I never said to him, Shani, matzah is different. Of course it was permitted before the Omer, because mitzvahs say, the positive mitzvah of eating matzah, it pushes away the itzah loisas of not eating chadash. So although all the dagan they found was also chadash, but they were able to eat it to be mekayim the mitzvah of eating matzah. Now the truth is, in Bavli it says, you can't fulfill your duty with matzah unless it's fitting to be eaten all 7 days of Pesach. Now this matzah you couldn't eat on the first day. It's still Yisro Chodosh. You couldn't eat on the 15th or the 16th until you brought the Omer offering. And some say even in these days, there's a time when it's fitting to eat. The night of the 15th already you could have a kazayis I'll say Doichelosase. And on the 16th is permitted after the Yom offering, and that's good enough to be fitting for 7 days. Alright. Let's carry on. There's another din. You can't be Yotze Matzah unless it's Matzah which is made from grain, which if it was Machmitz, it will be also because of Issur Chometz. If it's got another Issur on top of it, you can't be Yotze. So here there's another Issur of Chodosh as well. Yeah, it's not just an Issur of possible Machmitz, Chometz, but it's got another Issur as well. Alright, and the question is whether the Bavli argues on the Yerushalmi in that respect. According to Rabbi do Amos said mitzvah say it pushes away a negative after even though she'ena v'ksuva the mitzvahs are not mentioned together. Nicha, I understand why mitzvah say of matzah can push away the leis of chodosh even though they're not near each other in the Torah. But Rabbi Yossi do Amos he says ein mitzvah say mitzvah leis he can't push it away. And unless it was written next to it, then it can't be the mitzvah say of matzah can push away Chodosh because they're not near each other, right? So according to that, how did they fulfill their duty to eat matzah on the first night of Pesach? So according to Yossi, you have to say they ate matzah from wheat. The merchants, they bought abroad, they bought from the merchants. Or we could say the Issur Chodosh maybe didn't start when they came into the land. Maybe it started later. He says, when the Torah says coming in, doesn't mean straight away. It means it was after 14 years. 7 years they conquered the land, and 7 years dividing up the land. So as far as Mitzvah Chodosh, the Torah talks about coming in the land. So according to Mishmael, the Issur Chodosh maybe only started 14 years after they came in. So they were allowed to use the grain they found when they come into the land. It says, the Pasuk says they ate the day after the Kom Pesach. Now, why would they eat on the 16th? It must be so surely it's the 16th, because the Kom Pesach was eaten on the 15th, and the next day the eating was 16th. So let's learn from here, they didn't eat from the grain until the offering on the 16th. It must be before that was Issur Chodosh. It's a question on Rabbi Shmuel. So the question is based on the idea that Machras HaPesach means the day after eating Kom Pesach, right? So he understood it means the 16th. But elsewhere it says, Machras HaPesach, the next day after Yazav Bnei Sobi Ad Ram Aleinikom Mitzrayim, they left the land. When did the Jewish people leave Egypt? Lo b'chamisha, so it's on the 15th they left. So you see, Machras HaPesach is not the day after, if it's the day after eating the Kom Pesach, is the day after its offering, right, which was the 15th. So a pasuk says they ate from the grain Mimachas HaPesach, could mean the new grain already on the 15th of Nisan, even though they're not yet brought the Yom offering, because there's no Issur Chodosh before their conquering of the land. The fact they didn't eat from the new grain, maybe it wasn't needed, maybe they still had the old stuff. Anyway, we learned in our Mishnah, Yosemikan L'Sham, if you bring Peiros from Israel abroad, and it's made into bread, Rabbi Elazar Mechayev and Rabbi Akiva Paita. Yeah. Now, we brought Rabbi Yehuda who argues, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yehuda brings, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Akiva argue about produce of abroad coming into the land. Right? Rabbi Elazar passes from Chala, and Rabbi Akiva is Mechayev. And what are the sources here? Let's see. Amrei, they said, Rabbi Elazar min Asrei, he said that produce coming from abroad to the land is Chayev, min Asrei, from the place where he learns that produce that coming into the land is patur. Let's see. So let's go back a bit. Amri, they said, Rabbi Elazar, who holds that if it goes abroad, if it comes in, is chayav min asrei, from the same place where he learns that produce coming into the land is patur. One second. Let me go back a bit. We brought Machlokes Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Akiva, right? Produce from abroad coming into the land. Rabbi Elazar patas chala, Rabbi Akiva is mechayev, and we brought the various psukim. The argument they're arguing about what left the land is equal to the argument about what comes in the land. Let's see. Amri said, Rabbi Elazar, the view of Rabbi Elazar, that if it leaves the land, is chayav min asrei. is from the same source where he learns that some that comes into the land is potter. And Rabbi Akiva, who holds the produce that goes out is potter, min asrei is from the same source where he learns the stuff coming in is chayav. Let's see what's going on. Rabbi Lezer min asrei, he's based on his understanding. My Tavid Rabbi Lezer, why does he hold if it comes in it's potter? Because it says you'll eat milechem haaretz, you'll separate truma. The chiyuv depends if the bread is made mitzvah Eretz Yisrael, right? And therefore we learn also the way around. That which grew in Eretz Yisrael is chayav. But wherever it is, even if it goes out. Because what determines chala is the place where it grew. Rabbi Akiva min asrei, Rabbi Akiva based on his reasoning. Might have it Rabbi Akiva. Why does Rabbi Akiva say produce coming in? Right? What's his view? He says you'll come into the land, if there's something that obligates chala, shama in Eretz Yisrael, atem chayavin, you have to separate chala, even that which grew in chutz la'aretz. So we learn the opposite. Ein atem chayavin, you have to separate chala chutz la'aretz on that which grew in the land, if the action which is machayev chala was done abroad. Because what determines the chayav chala is the place where the action is done, which obligates the chala. Afa chutz la'aretz, if it comes, you have earth coming from abroad in a boat. It's Chaim Meister Shvius. Rabbi said, when is that? When the boat is touching the floor. Rabbana the Kishin Shemach Hanina. Tanakh Rabbi arguing by Machlekes. An argument which is talking about the borders of Eretz Yisrael. It says, wherever you walk, that will be your area. Sounds like even the land outside the borders, which are conquered, which the Klal Yisrael conquered, right? They become a chelek of Eretz Yisrael. But then the pasuk says the borders. So we learn ein bichlal el mashu b'prat. The klal, which says beginning of the pasuk, wherever you go, only what's mentioned in the pratim at the end of the pasuk, which is those borders. And it's telling you only that which is conquered within those borders is Eretz Yisrael. Land which is found beyond the borders of Eretz Yisrael does not become a chelek of Eretz Yisrael, even if it is conquered. Okur of Yehuda, this Rosh is like the view of Yehuda, who holds earth brought in a boat from outside the Gvul is potter from Masechet Shvius. And the reason is just like the area which was conquered in Chutz La'aretz doesn't become a chelek of Eretz Yisrael, so earth brought to Eretz Yisrael in a boat does not become a chelek of Eretz Yisrael. But the Chachamim, Mesiv and Rabbi Yehuda, they questioned it. They said no. If you're talking about land in like the borders, the little borders of Eretz Yisrael, well, because it says with the borders elsewhere, Me'amid ba'avalavon nazeh, ba'zanah gadol, ne'haparos, kol eretz achitim, the whole land of chitim adi, amagodav v'ashem shiel bulchem. The pasuk is extra. Now this pasuk, kol welcome, wherever you go, I don't need it, ain't alien. It's not telling me anything, the Sifrei Eretz Yisrael. It's not telling me the borders. So it's it's telling you about the area beyond the borders. That wherever you go, it will be a part of Eretz Yisrael. Based on this drasha, it comes out, the land of Chutz La'aretz can become a chelek of Eretz Yisrael through conquering. And therefore the Chachamim hold the earth of Chutz La'aretz brought into Eretz Yisrael in a boat is Chaim Masechet and Shvius. Now according to the Chachamim, even land outside Eretz Yisrael, which is conquered, can be a chelek of Eretz Yisrael. May I ask if that's the case, Masechet David Holech Mechabesh Baram Naraim, around Sova, David HaMelech was conquering various areas called Syria that should be like Eretz Yisrael. And anything that grows there, you chayavim b'chala, should be obligated in chala ben Torah. Why did the Mishnah say that which grows in Syria is only chayv rabbanan? So the Gemara answers, that conquering Shani was different. David Maniach Sfari Eretz Yisrael, David left aside some parts within the borders which he hadn't conquered yet, and went instead, went to conquer Syria, which is Sfarei Chuzlais, which is like borders. And that cloud that the parts of Chuzlais don't become a chelek of Eretz Yisrael unless they're conquered after you've conquered the whole of Eretz Yisrael. So he was conquering these places up north before he conquered proper Eretz Yisrael. After we explain the machlokes between Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda, the earth of Chuzlais, where a boat, as far as Trumah Masechet Shvius, what about the same argument with Chala? They wanted to say that the argument Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda is said also as far as Chala is concerned, and Mandam Tamal Chayev, the one who says with Masechet and Shvius that if it grows in a boat, in the earth, in a boat, is Chayev Masechet, And that's Tanakama Ufhacha. So also with Chala, they'll say he's made from produce, this is Chaim Chala. And Man Dama Tamam, the one who said over there as far as my sister Shvius, that which grows in a boat is possible. Ufhacha will also say here with Chaim Chala, that which grows in a boat is possible from Chaim Chala. Then he says, no, I feel it, Man Dama Tamam, even going to be Huda. He said, my sister Shvius, what grows in a boat is possible. Hacha, with Chaim Chala, he agrees that it's Chaim Chala. Because the source of Yehuda to Pata, that which grows in the ground, brought in the boat, is from the possibly brought, which tells me the Kedushas Yisrael is not Chala on the land of Chuz La'aretz. But this pasuk is talking only about Kedushas Chala through Kibush. The Chiv Chala doesn't need conquering, as we find the fact that Kibush Nechos to Israel, once the Jewish people came into the land, this Chayvul, the obligation started, although they hadn't conquered anywhere. So it could be Rabbi Yehuda agrees that there's a Chiv Chala on that which grows in the land brought from Chuz La'aretz. Okay, now the Gemara comes to another din as far as conquering. Yeshua ben Nun, before he conquered the land, he died before he conquered the whole land. Some of the areas which he had conquered, after a while, King of Aram conquered them back. And the Gemara brings a discussion about this. The conquering that Yeravam did, let's see, Ksiv it says, with Yeravam ben Yoash, he ruled on the 10 kings. Who Heshem Zgul he returned the borders, Ve'levoich Hamas ad Yam Arava, Kibar Hashem Elei Yisrael, like Hashem had spoken, the Shediba Biyadav to Yoina ben Amit, and Navi Shem Egasach, that Yoina had spoken about. Rabbi Hanani or Rabbana, Chada, one said, Kol ma shekivesh Yeshua, wherever Yeshua conquered, and then someone bought it, Kivesh there. Then Yeravam went and conquered it back and returned it to the Jewish people. See this again? Kol Masha Kibesh Yeshua, wherever Yeshua had conquered, and then and Aram conquered it, right? Another nation went and conquered it back. Kibesh there, Yeravam went now and returned it to the Jewish people. Yeah, he returned their borders back to what it was. But Chanam, another one, said, Yosef Mashikivish Yeshua, even the areas Yeshua didn't conquer. Kivesh there. This Yeravam went and conquered. He conquered more. Right? So he conquered more. That's why it says, Melavai Hamas ad Yom Arava. Right? So there are many cities that Yeshua didn't conquer, and Yeravam conquered them. Even cities Yeshua didn't conquer. Tali Rav Siddur, Rav Siddur learned in the Brayso, Sayed Rabbana, towards Rabbana, Yomim Kalim, a few days, Asi saw by Saharetz. The Jewish people lived in that area which Yeravam had conquered, only a few years. From the time of the conquering of Yeravam until they went into Galus. According to Hananiah, he returned their areas which Yeshua had conquered. I mean, they were there many years before Yeravam conquered them. And yet the Brayso says they were only there a short while. You have to say Yeravam acquired these areas, Yeshua didn't acquire. Therefore, the Jewish people never lived there. It was just the kivush of Yeravam. Okay. After Chuz La'aretz Shabbat Syria, you bring earth from abroad into Syria, Nasik is Syria, that God didn't like Syria. Afterwards, Yasam Misham Lekad is brought into Eretz Yisrael, and is Chayev, you're obligated in Ma'asus Shris from Torah. Rabbi Yehuda was like, when does this do now? That which grows in the earth of Chuz La'aretz, brought in a boat, is Chayev Ma'asus Shris, that which is Manchas Geshes. The boat is touching the ground. But if it's not touching the ground, what grows is pottle. Yeah? Now, the reason Rabbi Yehuda offer Chuz La'aretz doesn't have Kedushas Eretz Yisrael, but he agrees when the boat's touching the ground, then it's obligated in Dinei Eretz Yisrael. Amar Rav Chagai, Rabbi Yehuda Kedate, according to his view elsewhere, now we've learned with Techumin, this is about, now imagine a woman who takes spices or water from a friend on Yom Tov for her dough. Now then, where does the dough go on Yom Tov? Where does the water go, now that this water has been put into the dough? Where do the spices go, now they put into the dough? Rabbi Yehuda Pater b'mayim, he patters the tchum, the limitations of the first owners who owned the water. He allows you to take the dough beyond the tchum of the owner of the water. He's not bothered about the water owner. He doesn't limit the dough to the water owner. If there's nothing in it, you don't notice it. Yeah? So based on that, our Mishnah with the boat, the water underneath is considered not there, and it's not considered a chelik of the ground. It's considered there's a gap under the boat, and since this chalal is like a chasitza from the boat to the ground, the earth is not misbatel to the ground. So this is a question whether the water is considered significant or not. Yeah. Okay. Amravavim, lo mistabra delo. It makes more sense that it's connected with tchumen, but it makes more sense for chafa shitasa. Really, maybe this is the other way around. But he said water. There's nothing in it. Right? We're comparing. What are we comparing here, Rabbi Isai? We're comparing about whether the boat is on the ground or not. Now, is there water between the boat and the ground? Well, if the boat's on the ground, seemingly there's no water in between. So the same idea that a food where you don't look at the water in it. The water is insignificant. Same idea. And therefore the food will go where the food can go. We won't look at the owner of the water where that owner can go. So here as well, it seems to go because on the one hand he's saying water is nothing in it. So we should say, look, if the boat was not touching the ground, surely it would have the din as if it was on the ground. If the water is nothing in the water, there shouldn't be a gap between the boat and the ground. So even if the boat's floating around, we should treat it as if it's on the ground. Because but it's floating on the water. So we assume the water's not there. So as if the boat is on the ground. It must be the other holds that there is something in the water. So he said the water is chatzitza between the boat and the ground. The Mishnah in Beis says talking about a dough where there's water in it and it's not noticeable. So that's where he passes the water is bottled in the dough and there's nothing in it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, if let's say the boat was not touching the ground, there's a drabanan obligation to separate maestros. And therefore, you can take truma al shena nokov. Now, a flower pot without a hole is also rabbinical, right? So you can take truma one rabbinical for another rabbinical. The other way around. If there's no hole, so he doesn't get nourishment from the ground, he's got rabbinical obligation of Turas Maestros. So Maestros and Malacha, they are rabbinical. If it got mixed up in the majority of chulin, it wouldn't forbid the whole mixture, even though you don't have 100. It's butter barov, right? And therefore, if Israelim eat it, ein chayav and alav chomesh. You're not chayav chomesh for eating it, because this thing is a rabbinical version. Rav Hila of Shem Rav Elazar, hakoineh otzis nakov b'Surya. You buy your flower pot in Syria and there's no hole. You only acquired the earth underneath in the ground. Kaka shal gabov, the earth on top of it. Kana, you've acquired it. To obligate for maestros shvius. Okay. This din of the flower pot is chayv maestros shvius is the din. Even if this flower pot is on two pegs, doesn't touch the ground. Even a Yehuda agrees that it's not touching the ground. It's potter from maestros shvius. He holds like earth in a boat. It's not touching the ground. It's potter. But Moedabo here he agrees that the earth in the flower pot is chayv maestros, as he was going to explain. Ma beinoy lebein svina. What's the difference between a flower pot not touching the ground, where you're machayev, and a boat which is not touching the ground, where Yehuda patters lebein svina? So once the svina olav yoredis, look, the boat goes up and down. The earth can't be nullified to the ground. But zebim komahu, and this flower pot is in its place. It's bottom to the ground of Eretz Yisrael, even though it's sort of hanging up there. Okay. I think we will stop here, Rabbi Isai, yeah?